Hello and welcome to Are You Not Entertained? I'm Daniel.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm James.
And we are covering the final episode of Perry Mason. It's episode 8, or as they call it, chapter 8.
We have concluded.
They have concluded. Right, we're about to conclude.
Join them in the experience.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So what did you think, James? Because I know what you were aiming for. You've said it a few times, and
yes, I've said it a lot. There was a whole lot of expectations going into the season, into the show, period, because of the fact that it was called Perry Mason.
Right.
And while I feel like they almost entirely missed the mark, outside of the misdirection at the beginning of this episode, which I truly loved, outside of that, I feel like this was not Perry Mason. This is a story about a lawyer in the 1930s. And I'm okay with that. Like, I love film noir. I love detective stories. I love the kind of courtroom drama that you get from this. And it had all the elements of other movies that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
But it did not have what I was wanting from a Perry Mason story, if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense.
While I absolutely loved this season, I think I would have enjoyed it a little more if I hadn't been baffled the entire time as to why it was called Perry Mason, except for the fact that they wanted to latch on to a known property and make some extra viewership because of it.
Right.
Sure.
And that's kind of how I feel about it, is that they had a quality script. They had an incredible IP outside. I think this is totally not Perry Mason. And I think that they could have created something entirely new, and HBO has the pedigree to be able to do that with something completely original. And that it was actually hindered by the fact that they called it what they did because it was so far from the source material.
Sure.
And that's my biggest gripe with the entire thing. As far as the production value, as far as the story, as far as the intrigue, as far as how captivating it was, 100%, I was on board the whole time. It's just they didn't deliver on the core tenets that I consider Perry Mason-ish, and
right.
that was the only downfall, is that they felt like it was necessary for them to latch themselves onto an existing IP, intellectual property, instead of creating something entirely new, which HBO usually doesn't follow that path.
Yeah. Well, and they could have done it easily.
Right. So it was just a little surprising to me. But all in all, I think that it was outstanding television. I loved pretty much every episode. And if this was available on something like Netflix where I could have binged it, this would have been 2 nights. I would have been done with this fast because I was enthralled.
Yeah.
And excited for each episode. So, that's kind of how I stand on it. I absolutely loved it, but was still a little baffled as to the title.
Fair enough. What about you, Rachel? I know you had been on the fence for most of this.
Yeah, I was on the fence, and then around chapter 5, I was much happier with it. And while I'll say this was an interesting episode, I'm out.
Okay.
I enjoyed the first season. It had some entertainment value, but overall, as calling this the first season of the revival of Perry Mason, no. I just don't really like it. You didn't get necessarily a lot of conclusion out of this episode.
Nope.
You had some answers, but you really didn't get much in the way of finalizations. And again, with the whole Perry Mason thing, that's the point. If we could have had a solid wrap up for season 1, I think that would have sold me a little bit more. So I know I'm the only one of the group that's like, no, I didn't like this. But
no, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
That's my stance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
I don't think you're wrong at all. Yeah, I think that subjectively that's a very valid opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But what about you, Daniel?
So I'm in both of your boats.
Okay.
Go figure.
1 foot in each. I got
1 foot in each. Yeah. I'm holding them together.
Pick a boat or fall in the water.
Yeah.
So
like Spider-Man in Homecoming.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Just like that.
Holding the ship together.
So I really enjoyed the series. I'm with you as far as why they necessarily called it Perry Mason, other than just to grab a hold of something that already exists and pull viewership based specifically on that.
Sure. Yeah, just to draw an existing fan base.
Yeah, and that mainly relies on, or mainly that opinion, my opinion, in that mainly relies on the fact that they don't do a lot of the Perry Mason tropes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, while I understand it for it being an HBO series and not, a 30-minute television series that plays every day, it is not what you expect from a show called Perry Mason. They do a lot of things. I think that they do a lot of things right for a show that's named Perry Mason. I think they did a good job with the characters, how those characters actually portray themselves and how they fit into the story. I think that's done really well. I think that Perry Mason as Perry Mason is really good, but again, they miss some of the things that you would expect from a Perry Mason show. Not as much in the courtroom. No confessions on the stand. Yeah, I get what they did with the beginning of this episode with the no one confesses on the stand. It's like, yeah, that's probably very, very true. But for me, I enjoyed the series. I did not enjoy this last episode as much as I was hoping to. And maybe that's just my expectations and maybe the kind of buildup that it was given, because I was expecting a big courtroom showdown, and I was expecting answers to some of these things. And while you get thinly veiled answers to certain things, it seems to me like they specifically left a lot of things open in order to grab viewership for the next season, which I can kind of understand, but at the same time, I would prefer a harder hitting like final episode. To me, it was just kind of it was a soft close, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, I definitely identify with that. I think maybe that's part of my problem was the expectation. I expected some big, giant clothes from Perry Mason, kind of like we were starting to get in the beginning, which that was a great part of the episode. But aside from that, I don't really see what makes this Perry Mason. It would be like calling a show Matlock and then never having anyone on the stand.
Right.
Because they're created by the same people, so it's that same style of show where you have a case, a conclusion, you move on.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I feel like the fact that they called it Perry Mason is the thing that has thrown us off the entire time, because we were looking for that through line that just never existed. But that being said, they did do some things right. And while I feel like there was some ambiguity as to like what happened to the Dodson baby's body, and there were some questions out there that never felt like they were truly resolved. The major ones were, what happened with the detectives, I felt like was I guess the closest to justice in a corrupt world like you're going to get. The way that Sister Alice kind of created a new life for herself, especially after last episode where you saw how, I guess, corrupt her mother was.
Yeah.
And
everything was imploding around her.
Yeah. And that I kind of feel like that unless you got a witness confession on the stand, which, they expressly said that doesn't happen in real life.
Right.
You weren't going to have an acquittal and if they had a guilty verdict, I would have felt disappointed. It would have been a tragedy at that point.
Yeah.
So a mistrial was the best option. And when it comes down to it, while we didn't get the treating the witnesses hostile and getting the confession out of them on the stand, that closing speech was amazing. And I think that kind of speaks to what a modern day perspective on Perry Mason should be. And that was sold.
Because, I mean, it obviously worked too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were trying to go. They were
it
trying to go the
reasonable doubt.
Yeah. Well, they were going the illegal route and paying off a juror, but there were two other jurors that were
right.
Deadlocked.
That was the kicker, is when you found out that he had paid Strickland, or he gotten Strickland to pay off one of the jurors to deadlock it.
Yeah.
And it turns out he didn't need it because he was insecure about his own abilities, and he actually pulled it off.
Right.
That was insurance that didn't need to be paid.
Yeah, exactly. Which is good. Shows you Perry's a good lawyer.
If not, still a little dirty.
Well, yeah.
Sure.
Well, as you could tell from the first scene, while it was all imaginary and it was basically going over his game plan for the next day, making up things and saying he's got evidence that he didn't have. I mean, sure.
It's not strictly legal.
No, it's not legal.
It's very illegal, in fact.
Exactly.
That's jury tampering. Yeah.
So, I think
some mafioso stuff.
Right. I think they did a lot of that stuff correctly.
Yeah.
There were a few things that they, I guess, missed the mark on for me, which is I understand why Ennis got what he got, but I would have much preferred if there had been other evidence uncovered that maybe he'd missed, like just a little piece that would have sown that doubt and kind of tied him to it during the actual courtroom portion.
It felt underhanded that he had to be dealt with by his own partner, Holcomb, I think was his name.
Yeah.
That he didn't get what was coming to him, considering as the audience we know he's virtually the murderer of the baby.
Right.
And he's the one who orchestrated everything and caused all of the heartache that ensued. And so, to see it be dealt with kind of on the criminal underworld, it felt dissatisfying. But I think that was what they're going for. That in real life, you don't get to find justice in the courtroom. That most of the time, that's not really how the world works, as much as we would like to believe that it does. At least we got that, because the other alternative was he just goes free.
Well, yeah, no, and I don't know. I think that there's other ways that they could have done the whole, uh, criminal justice, not criminal justice, but criminal justice.
Yeah.
um, that would have been more satisfying than just a few guys come and dunk him, dunk him in some water and drown him.
Well, and they did potentially set this up with the mistrial for seeing more about this.
Well, yeah, but Holcomb just covered the tracks completely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Innocent.
And
Out.
I think it was
would have been-
implied that that wasn't going to happen because in the case of a mistrial, they have the opportunity to face it again. But I don't think the DA is going to put himself in jeopardy like that to lose it, because when you have a mistrial, you lose a lot of the fervor from the populace. And that's what he relied on the entire time.
Right.
And so without it being a newsworthy hot button issue, and the news moves on, to then turn around and wait 4 or 5 months for it to resume another trial, I don't think the DA will pursue it, because he's more concerned with getting elected as mayor than he is with winning this case.
Well, right. And so there's going to be a new DA as well.
Right.
So does he really want to? Well, and the answer is no, because the DA already knows the case.
Right.
He helped Perry.
Yeah. So
that would be something.
Yeah, I think there was a lot to be had here. I felt like that they wrapped up the story that they had very well, and that in a vacuum, I would have enjoyed this story so much if it had been Mason Jones, attorney at law.
Yeah, not Perry Mason.
Yeah, because that set so many expectations for me from the beginning that we were never lived up to, other
Right.
than the fact that he was a lawyer by the end of it, by episode, 5?
Yeah.
And so
5 or 6.
yeah. And so there was just, it was detrimental to pull me in with the pretense of it being a Perry Mason show.
Yeah.
But once I was able to let that go, I enjoyed the hell out of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, it is named what it's named, and there's nothing I can do about that. And they're going to do whatever they feel like doing with the show.
Mm-hmm.
But
I hope they continue with the second season.
Yeah, and with what I've seen so far, I have liked it. Like I said, a little disappointed from the last episode, but not a killer for me. And I will definitely watch the second season when it comes out.
I'm sure I'll watch the second season, but
begrudgingly.
The lack of meeting my expectations in this episode, I was so let down that I don't want to watch another season.
Well,
I think that's fair.
You just got to let go of the name. I think once you've made that mental decision that they're not going to do
exactly
what you think they should do.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's Perry Mason, and I don't want reality right now, because reality is not very much fun at the moment.
Yeah, it's been pretty bad all year.
Idyllic world where Perry Mason solves the day, or maybe.
No, I get
sure
that.
They weren't planning.
I was going to say
this
maybe it's just
year.
slightly unfortunate timing for them, because I get that they wanted a more real take on Perry Mason.
Yeah, they're coming off of Game of Thrones, where there's this entire
super fantasy world.
Yeah, but there's also this 10 seasons of complex story that's interwoven and, kind of undercutting expectations with the way that you perceive a fantasy story. And I think that they did a good job if we lived in that world still. But yeah, to be honest with you, I'm kind of with you on that, Rachel, is that like right now I kind of don't want the truth. I just want a fantasy world because life sucks. And so like a good wrap up where every episode you have the finale where the good guy wins and the bad guy feels terrible
Rots
for what
in
they've
jail.
done. Yeah. Like that
Sure.
that's something that I've been watching more romantic comedies lately. just because there's happy endings in them.
Right.
And I need a happy ending right now. And so, and I don't mean it like that, but no, I want some joy, even though that's not the way the world actually works. And I think that there was a little bit of detriment to this season because of that.
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of horror movies, so I wonder what that
God.
says. But I feel like we spend, for me, I spend 50 hours a week working and in reality. So having an hour of something super fun would have been okay. I'm not. Well, no, I
think
can't
you
even
should have watched a different show.
Exactly.
I mean, this was an entire season about a dead baby, which is horrible.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not exactly fun.
I think, yeah.
It just left me with a lot of questions because where did the mystery baby come from?
Yeah,
Does she just keep that baby? It's not even the right eye color. Everyone else is going to know it's not your baby.
Well, they're keeping it. They're running around doing pop-up churches.
I know.
With this random baby that
the
they stole from somewhere.
Is she just going to be the new preaching sensation?
Well, I'm hoping that some of that stuff comes out next season, just as a kind of tie up loose ends. But yes,
I almost hope they don't. I hope they bring Sister Alice back in some capacity because of her character arc and her evolution. But when it comes to the church, when it comes to the church, as an audience, we know that they're a sham, and that Sister Alice has some sort of belief and faith, and maybe even some spiritual guidance from somewhere else, but. We know that the church themselves are merely charlatans, and I'm done with that. There's no illusion in my mind, and to continue on with that, I don't know. I don't feel like I need to see them get what they deserve. I just don't want to see them anymore.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right. Well. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to cover on either the final episode or the season as a whole?
No.
Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode at least a little bit. I felt like this season was wrapped up kind of cleanly with this, as clean as something that wanted to take itself seriously and be realistic could. Hopefully you enjoyed our episode covering this and the previous episodes that we had as well. If you did, please go online, like, and subscribe, and join us next time on Were You Not Entertained?